Welcome to Selling Circular, the podcast dedicated to exploring the innovative minds and ideas shaping our transition to a circular economy. I'm Garr Punnett, CEO of LoopLayer. I'm the only host today on the podcast because in a series of events, Sabira is in India visiting family, and we unfortunately had to record an emergency podcast after one of our guests was abruptly laid off. So ultimately, we had to pull the episode and get to putting out a new episode for the week. So to jump right into it, on this episode of Selling Circular, we are learning more about the world of decentralized plastic recycling and manufacturing. Our guest today is Joseph Klatt, founder of Marble Plastics, a company that creates beautiful, durable products from 100% recycled plastic. Joseph's journey into sustainable materials is both inspiring and practical, offering valuable insights into anyone interested in joining this particular set of circular economy solutions. Before we jump into the interview, though, let's talk about why his work matters. The plastic crisis continues to worsen. We all know the stats. If you don't, only about 9% of all plastic that's ever been produced has actually been recycled. And despite innovation and current technical possibilities for recycling, sorting, transportation, processing, and competition, virgin plastics markets continue to challenge plastic recycling at the scale that we actually need to solve this and make a solution happen. So what makes Joseph's approach particularly interesting is his focus on decentralized regional solutions that can address these challenges while creating economic opportunities. Joseph's background includes significant work with Precious Plastic, an open source global initiative founded by Dutch designer Dave Hawkins, which I'm sure I butchered the actual pronunciation of that last name. But Precious Plastic has really been important in democratizing plastic recycling by developing small-scale open-source machines that enable communities worldwide to recycle plastic waste into new products. Think about this again as you have basically a machine that you can shred plastic and then mold it into products that you might need in your community. This grassroots movement continues to empower thousands of organizations globally to take plastic recycling into their own hands. While Precious Plastics focus on open source technology and community-based recycling initiatives, these valiant efforts have made it kind of tricky to make a sustainable revenue source for that organization. So ultimately, Joseph wanted to take a different approach with Marble Plastics. His company has scaled the concept to create commercial-grade recycled plastic sheets that can be fabricated into furniture, countertops, and wall coverings. Marble Plastics specializes in working with polystyrene, plastic type number 6 for those counting at home, which is rarely recycled in the conventional systems, but works exceptionally well for creating durable structural products. What makes Joseph's work particularly valuable is his emphasis on regional manufacturing and supply chains. By processing plastic waste locally and creating products for local markets, companies like Marble Plastics can offer a couple key benefits. One, the environmental impact, reducing transportation and emissions, creating jobs ultimately in that local market from collection and processing to fabrication, the energy savings associated with manufacturing recycled plastics locally, and then ultimately too, and sometimes the most important part, is that community engagement process, making recycling visible within communities and distinctive products that tell a sustainability story. Rather than shipping across the globe or relying on mass production techniques, this decentralized approach allows communities to develop solutions tailored to potentially specific needs and resources. In Marble Plastics' case, figuring out what their clients might want for specific projects or what products might actually be selling regionally. So in our pre-recorded interview with Joseph, we'll explore how he transitioned from government work at Ohio EPA to his international experience with Precious Plastic, and finally his founding of Marble Plastics. I love his story. It demonstrates how entrepreneurship, technical knowledge, and sustainability principles can come together to create viable business models that address environmental challenges. But first, we would like to take a moment to discuss our first Selling Circular partnership with Circularity and Trellis Group.
Hey Circular Squad, we're teaming up with our friends at Trellis Group to bring you the inside scoop on the hottest event in circular economy, Circularity 2025 in Denver.
If you're getting CES vibes, think about that, except instead of the Consumer Electronics Show, we've actually got 3 days of circular economy solutions. It's why we love Circularity, not just because it's the preeminent proving ground for circular economy breakthroughs, but also it's because where we actually meet many of our podcast guests for the first time. They actually end up becoming friends.
Which we love. So from April 29th to May 1st, Colorado Convention Center is going to be buzzing with innovators, policy movers and shakers, and circularity change makers. And if you're there in person or online, our partnership with the Trellis Group has got you covered. So when you join in person, you're going to have inspiring keynotes, actionable workshops, and the ability to share great meals with industry colleagues. And then, of course, you can take those learnings back to your team. And if you're joining online, we've also partnered with Circularity to bring you live inside content from the conference.
You get to see Sabira behind the scenes, working the interviews. So use code C25podcast at registration for 15% off passes. But hurry, because again, as the conference gets closer, the prices go up. So grab your reusable coffee cup, rally that team, because we're all about building this future together, one reclaimed polymer / one circular partnership at a time.
See you in Denver.
We're so excited to talk to you about marble plastics. I will say on record here, I had not actually known about marble plastics until I read an article that had you all featured in it that was with a designer that was creating a cafe, KidSuper. I like his stuff, but that's more aspirational. I keep my uniform fairly monochromatic and minimal, but I like to look at cool things that fashion designers are doing, and that incorporated your work. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your work and what that meant for the KidSuper Cafe, and ultimately you could start us with what marble plastics is, and then we can kind of go from there.
Cool. Yeah, so at Marble Plastics, we produce recycled plastic sheet material, which can be cut and fabricated into furniture, countertops, and wall coverings. And we use 100% recycled material, recycled plastic. And the project you mentioned in particular is a furniture project that we did with KidSuper, who is a designer out of New York City. And he was opening a new cafe as part of like a kind of a maker space that he runs, where he has a retail store, a screen printing shop, and then a cafe. And we made a suite of benches out of our material that we bent into some circular forms, and then we added wheels to the benches because it's like a very mobile space, so they move it around for different exhibitions. And that was a project we did last year, and really cool.
Can you talk a little bit about the feedstocks involved? Because I know there's probably a set feedstock that you prefer, maybe a type of material, coloration. I know that this one had a little bit of a different feedstock and maybe even a different message to it, given sort of the pinkish hue. That I really enjoyed that background of that.
Yeah. So in general, we source our material from recyclers who they're the ones collecting, sorting, processing, shredding the material. And then we buy it from them, and we use that material then to mold into our panels. So we also then source some material ourselves, especially when we're trying to find a specific color. So in this case, KidSuper was doing a collaboration with another brand for their cafe, and their brand colors are pink. So we, through our network here in Columbus, got a hold of some pink material that was from the Nationwide Children's Hospital. So it was like pipette holders. It's a medical thing in medical labs. And
I just want to reiterate how many pipette holders there are in labs. We at my time at Ripley, we dealt with a lot of pipette holders. Nice. Great that there's a use for it in coloring. Yeah.
Yeah. In particular, it's a useful material because it's clean and it's colorful. So that's really valuable for us because it's hard to find that material. Usually when recyclers are sourcing material like from a curbside program, they mix all of the colors all together. And while it makes sense when you're doing a large scale, you don't have the time and energy to sort out the colors. But for us, it's really valuable to have that color segregated so you can make a specific palette. And that's what we did for this project with KidSuper.
And when you work with the recyclers, do you have to specify specific quality? I think they have different grades of plastic. So because of the output of what you're thinking about, kind of like what are the specs or requirements that you have to share with the recyclers?
Yeah, in general, plastics is a very, very wide ranging material. So a lot of people think, okay, it's glass, paper, plastic in my recycling bin, and that's true. But the different plastic types within that plastic bin are almost as different from each other than plastic is different from glass, or glass is different from metal. I mean, they're like radically different because essentially they're just different makeup of chemicals, and there's sort of families that get grouped together. But in general, plastics is a very difficult material to recycle because of that issue, because of the fact that plastics are so different from each other. So we work with primarily one type of plastic, which is polystyrene, plastic type number 6. So if you see the recycling number 6, that's something we can use. And it's a plastic type that is not generally collected or recycled by your residential stream, primarily because it's not a huge percentage of the total volume. So for most big recyclers, it's not really worth it to collect and sort it out.
Does
It's not,
real quickly interjecting on that, does that make it harder, or does that make it more difficult or easier to collect that material stream?
well, it's, it ends up in the stream. It's
Got it.
there. Recycler or so at the material recovery facility, what happens is the recyclers just don't sort it out, so it goes into the trash. Um, because it's just not worth it for them. And there's not a lot of infrastructure actually in the US to process that material. There's almost, I don't think any curbside program really that material gets recycled. So that's where we come in and we source the material directly. So there are some industrial recyclers out there that will process post-commercial and post-industrial waste in polystyrene. But yeah, most residential streams do not collect it. But we focus on that material, number one, because it's harder to recycle from a logistical economic standpoint. But it works really well in our process, which is essentially compression molding. And it also makes a product that is, it's a kind of great functional, durable product. Because of polystyrene's structure, it's a relatively hard plastic. So when you're making furniture, that's extremely useful. So that showed up in those benches that we made for KidSuper, but it shows up a lot in our other products where you can use it as a more structural component of the furniture. Where a lot of other plastics are soft plastics, so like HDPE and polypropylene, which are the most common plastics out there, those are more soft. And you can still use them for furniture, but it's not as good as polystyrene. So that's why we focus on that stream.
When it comes to the work you've done with precious plastics, I'm really interested because you made a distinct, almost a distinct career move. You worked with precious plastics, which was more of a community-based initiative approach on setting up a lot of these workstations across the globe, focusing on recycled plastic, but now positioned more in marble plastics to kind of an industrial scale, maybe for-profit manufacturing approach. Can you talk about that transition? Can you talk about what that either meant in seeing the successes you were having at Precious, but also there were probably some challenges there, and then you yourself going, maybe there's an opportunity here?
Yeah. So at Precious Plastic, which is really like a global nonprofit that's trying to solve the plastic waste problem by creating open source technologies, primarily machinery, that helps entrepreneurs to make their own small scale recycling business. And so I was leading that project for a few years in Europe, and helping to develop the machines, also installing the machines in different communities around the world, mostly in the global south. And during that time, I learned a bunch about plastics and machinery, how to process them. And one of the techniques that we were kind of pioneering was this compression molding of sheet goods. And I really started to see that technology take off, especially in Europe, but also in Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And the reason for that is because the sheet products are just a really functional product, but also very aesthetic, that tell the story of recycling. If you think about most plastic goods, they're almost all homogeneous in color. But with this different technology, you really can see the specs of the shredded material. And what that does is it helps connect the user, the person that's using the piece of furniture, to the actual material. And so it just makes it really kind of fun and has a great story to it. So I saw that technology really taking off, and I was thinking back to, growing up in the US, knowing the big plastic waste problem that we have here. And I thought, this is a great opportunity. I think I'm going to take what I learned. I wanted to come home anyway, and decided to do that. So I came home to Ohio and started Marble Plastics.
No, I was gonna say there's just something so natural about that plastic too. Like it's so artificial, yet there's sort of a. I think what you all maybe do well in this is there's something.
Looks like a granite.
Yeah, but and to that point, it is almost very approachable and not too foreign. And I think I really like those design choices. That's all I was gonna say on.
Yeah. I was curious, your international experience is more, it sounds like a service model, right? Like you're trying to solve a user problem, design a product, and put it out there in the world versus now you run a business where you're delivering furniture and wall paneling. So there's a lot of expertise that goes, there's a material expertise about plastic itself. There's like the machinery on molding it, and then there's the actual like end user product of furniture. Tell us about like how you went about constructing your team and coming up with, this is the suite of products that we want to offer.
Yeah, I think it's been a journey, definitely figuring that all out. And even though I had a lot of experience in plastics and some in manufacturing and some in machine making, um, it was still difficult because plastics, because kind of goes back to that point about how different plastics are. Um, it's hard. It's hard to recycle plastics, and that's why not that many people do it. Because just the processing parameters, what temperature you have to have it, what pressure you need to put on the material. So basically, I just got back and just got started. I started with some small precious plastic type machinery that I knew so well from Europe, and my partner and I, we started in his garage actually. So really small scale, just like I'd helped set up around the world.
That's a
We
pretty
just
good
started.
start story. The garages have a good batting average. Yeah.
I know, right? So we just got started. I was prototyping different waste streams based on my network that I had from number one, growing up in Ohio, but also working at Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. I knew a lot of recyclers and a lot of manufacturers that had waste streams. So we just started prototyping materials. And then once we felt like, okay, we have a process we think works, there seems to be a market here in the US, then we decided to really go commercial scale. It's still, relatively small scale compared to, if you think about, most manufacturers are big, especially in recycling, especially in plastics. However, it's big enough to be to the point of you can make a big product, which is a 4 by 8 foot sheet of plastic, which is a pretty big piece of material, um, and big enough to make big products like human-sized furniture. So yeah, we basically just started running our new production line, which we got when we got a small factory space. And so we've really been running about a year and a half. And throughout that time, it's constant iteration, constant learning, because manufacturing is hard on its own. Manufacturing plastic is hard. Using recycled plastic is even harder. So it's been a lot of learning for sure.
I'm actually curious too on your take on all of that is hard. Great, perfect. Good business model to start there on. Okay, the difficulty in manufacturing. Now you're then also on the other side, what we often see in circular economy and sustainability, you're dealing with then the market question mark. That education, I don't want this. This seems different than what I'm used to. How do you approach that? How did how is this also probably an evolution of dealing with that education and that market dynamic? Where do you find yourself in that now?
Yeah. So I definitely borrowed from the fact that I saw success in other parts of the world and other companies. And I, looked at how were they marketing it, who were their customers. Um, and even though the US is a bit behind Europe in terms of environmental sustainability, there's still a segment of our society that is very interested. So I started from there, then started talking to people and showing them the product and getting their feedback. And yeah, there is sometimes pushback from a new material that they're not familiar working with. But one thing that we've leaned into is the fact that, a lot of people are familiar with a product called Solid Surface or Corian or Formica. Those are like the brand
Hmm.
names of Solid Surface. And people don't realize that those are essentially plastic sheets, which they've used for their countertop for many, many years. So when we're talking to like a fabricator or an architect, we say, hey, we're Marble Plastics. We make a solid surface material, which is made from recycled plastic. And that helps us enter the market because it puts us in a category which is familiar to those folks.
That so makes sense, because again, you're not saying, hey, this is a whole new world. You're just saying, hey, same thing, same here. You already know this product. This design wise, I think is very appealing, and then you're just swapping that out. And I'm sure that design aspect too also probably gets a lot of attention.
Yeah, and I think we lean into the design aspect to the fact that it looks very recycled. So if you imagine a restaurant that really wants to use sustainable materials and then share that with their patrons, if they use like a sustainably forested wood product, the end user really doesn't know that. They'd have to maybe look on the underside of the table, look for that little mark that says, made from a sustainably sourced forest material. But with a recycled plastic product like this, it really tells the story itself because it looks recycled. It has a sort of marbly granite look to it, but you don't see like reds and greens in marble. So you can immediately tell something's different, and that helps spark the conversation. And that's what we want really through our product. Because ultimately, we're not saying that recycling is the end all be all for solving the plastic waste problem. What we're trying to do is educate people through product that plastic is a valuable material, shouldn't be wasted and used on single-use items. And we do that through making a beautiful product that starts that conversation.
What I love about that, real quick, Sabira, sorry, I so emotionally connect with this. I think there's an element, I love the communication. There's something childish about it that from a design perspective makes me go, like I can't remember which product it was. I wish I had the inventory right in front of me, but it was like, oh, this is basically looks like a jawbreaker. Like this basically, there's something so elemental to that as a kid, I feel like, where it's like, oh, this looks so playful and yet still is educational, and we can identify with that so clearly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was curious because you mentioned the architects, and then there's also the end buyer, maybe the restaurant owner, whoever, is it challenging to have to market to both types of customers, and who actually ends up making the decision? Do you find that the demand pull is more with the end customer who influences the architect, or the architect has that ability to choose and you're trying to influence like the benefits and specs of your product over your competitors?
So we're going into classic buyer persona here, that we're going deep into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the building materials market, which I did not know this before I got into it, it's a very fragmented market. There's many decision makers, many different people to influence. They have different percentages in terms of total influence. You have the end owner of the restaurant, you have the architect, you also have a fabricator that might be the one that actually buys the sheet goods and then makes it into the furniture or the countertop. There's mill workers. There's many, many parts of that chain. I think we found the most entry with architects and designers, interior designers.
Just speccing it right in.
Yes, speccing the material.
Yeah.
Also with fabricators. So fabricators are the ones that usually cut the material and make like the furniture that you see in a restaurant. We've gotten in with a really great fabricator in Columbus that likes to use our material, and they also talk it up to their architects that they work with. So I'd say the short answer is kind of everyone has been ended up being important, and there hasn't been one that has jumped out as the most important so far.
I would so Gelato was what I was thinking of. That the SKU was really hitting me.
Nice, yeah.
What was behind the naming? What was behind the naming, and then actually which your SKUs you're pursuing first?
I guess what's behind that material in particular is bread tags. So that little piece of plastic that you tie your bread off with, that's one of those. It's kind of like the pipette holders.
Absolutely.
Where a clean, colorful source of material. And we have partnered up with this nonprofit in Indianapolis. It's a young woman who collects bread tags from all over the country. People send them to her, and she sells them to recyclers like us. And then she uses that money to buy people wheelchairs who can't afford them. So anyway, I found her nonprofit online, and I was like, I want these bread tags.
I'm in. Yes, I'm in. Yes.
So I'm actually sitting on a desk right now that has that material on it.
I want it. I need to figure out. Yes, my new desk. Yeah.
But yeah, so we got those spread tags, and that became our gelato pattern. And we called it gelato. Yeah, it just kind of has that fun vibe, playful vibe to it. And yeah, that's how it ended up.
Well, since there's stories behind these, then I gotta pick more. We've got refrigerator liners. Is that the white spit, like sort of the white encasing of a refrigerator? That's what's being used?
Yeah, it is. So that depending on the type of refrigerator, but like the outside covering, um, or the bins that are on the inside of a refrigerator
Oh. Yeah.
that like your I forget what that's called, like the frost or whatever for your vegetables.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Or the humidifying bins too, those bins. So
yeah,
is that what we're talking? Okay, got it. Okay, fascinating.
because
Yeah, that's the only one I need to pull that one thread too. I just need to know. Yeah.
and that just kind of happens to be the product that are the recycler that we work with that they source. Um, and the thing about polystyrene, it has very particular applications. So CD cases, refrigerators, a lot of electronic waste. So yeah, we talk to a recycler and say, hey, what are the products that you're really recycling? We find those stories and then we incorporate them into marketing our product because that is what makes our product.
So, do you then have a minimum, like, can Gar or I, if we're doing a home project, place an order, or are you looking for more commercial scale customers like schools or restaurants? Yeah. What scale are you looking for?
I mean, our goal is to work on big commercial projects. However, yeah, we're still like a startup, so we do pretty much anything that people ask if they would like some sort of piece of furniture or they just want to buy a sheet of material, then we do it. Yeah, because we like it and it's fun to work with individual people too.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing massive collab opportunity for people that
Yeah.
are at organizations. You're looking to design something different. That's quality pipeline right here.
Yeah. And the other thing that has come up quite a bit is there's a lot of companies out there that have a unique waste stream that they want to do something interesting with that maybe a typical recycling stream it doesn't make sense for. And I'll give you an example called from a company called PACT Collective. Actually, they would be great to have on your guys' show. It's a consortium of cosmetic retailers that they have drop-off bins at the retailers where people can bring back the cosmetics. And PACT Collective is the one organizing that amongst different companies. And we are working with their material. We're about to make them soap dishes that they're going to give out to their employees. But that, yeah, we've run into that situation a lot where there's a company or a group of companies that have a unique waste stream. We turn that into a sheet or a product and then either sell it or give it back to them, depending on how it all works out.
I love that as a pre-competitive motion is that it doesn't matter in this case, cosmetic companies, it doesn't matter that they're competing with each other, but they can still collectively offer this service and then work with somebody like you because they have the power of aggregating like materials
That
together.
supply.
Yeah.
That is such a good example. Yeah, I love that.
Where do you think? What do you? I mean, where does policy kind of play into this in the future? I mean, coming from pulling some threads of again some Ohio EPA work, being a part of that. I mean, where do you think governments could support more of these efforts? Let's not talk nationally. Let's talk on the state level or even in the municipal level. What could be done? I mean, what are you seeing from your vantage point where it's like, what if we could just do this?
I think it's such a difficult problem that I think it requires a myriad of solutions. I
Yeah.
do think government has a role to play, especially in funding recycling infrastructure. I think that's very important. It's something that the Ohio EPA does. It is helpful for the business community. Ultimately, I think there needs to be some sort of regulation around total plastic production that can help make virgin plastic more expensive compared to recycled
Mm-hmm.
material. Ultimately, that's what recyclers are fighting all the time, is that recycled material is a replacement good for virgin plastic. So when the price of oil goes up, that means virgin plastic goes up. That means recycled plastic price goes up. It's good for recyclers. when the price of oil goes down, that makes virgin plastic cheap, and that makes recycled plastic really cheap. So it's bad for them. And oftentimes they go out of business when the price of oil drops. So yeah, stabilizing energy markets, that's also something that would be more on the federal or international level. Yeah, so there's many things that government can do, but ultimately I think we cannot rely on the government to do it. I think we have to just act now, try to help change consumer behavior, help them interact with the material, and shift the way that we think about plastic.
I was wondering then, I'm still circling back to the to the customer and then the process. If you're willing, well, I'm curious, like, who have you seen be the main end customer, right? Even who the architect is serving. Are you seeing a thematic like group that are early adopters and innovators?
I think the best customer is really consumer facing brands, because those companies have they have the highest incentive to um, be the most sustainable because they're accountable to their end users. There's no like middleman in between them. Um, and those are like you think about Nike or Adidas or kind of big consumer brands like that. You know, I think there is a fair amount of greenwashing that goes on in that arena, but there's a lot of great work that does well because of their leadership as well. So those
A lot
types
of give
of
and take in those relationships there.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Um, but yeah, those I think are the sort of ideal best customers, and those are the bigger ones as well that make it more viable to do this type of work. Yeah, so we've seen interest from those companies, but it's the smaller ones that also help us make it work in the short term.
And so maybe one more question then. So if we're, because you're manufacturing the 4x8 sheets, are you also able to deliver like the custom product, or you're just selling the sheet? And if you are doing the custom product, what does it take to be able to kind of like design it end to end?
Yeah, it's a great question and something that we're still like kind of figuring out. Like I said, because we're kind of early stage, we've kind of just done everything that we can. Um, Last year was about, I'd say, at least 50% custom furniture,
Wow.
that we fabricated ourselves. And we're actually in the same building as a custom furniture manufacturer. So
Hmm.
we rely on them sometimes to help us get projects done, or even just like consulting, like how do we fix this problem? Um, and the other 50% of our work has been selling the sheet goods, mostly to fabricators that make the furniture for the restaurant. So those are kind of the two main buckets. And I think I could see us going in either route, maybe more focusing on the furniture or more just focusing on the sheet goods. Um, I think my preference would be to focus on the sheets and to sell them to fabricators or furniture makers, people that want to use them, because just making the sheet out of recycled material is hard enough. We already have like many challenges to make that a good product, and
Mm.
to make a quality piece of furniture is a whole other bucket of challenges. So me, I guess, as like a business owner, I would like to keep things as simple as possible. um, but in the short term, yeah, when we do have the skills and ability to make custom furniture, so we do it. Um, but yeah, I could see us kind of going both ways, and right now it's both.
When that plays into this hyper regional aspect of manufacturing and maybe not collecting, I think you're speaking about collecting some of this feedstock from the players that you can depending on your needs. Um, but when it plays into that balance of scaling a business. I hate talking about scale sometimes because we all imagine that any company that needs to get built needs to be the biggest thing in the world or else it's somehow a failure. And it's like, no, no, no. There are very successful businesses that can be small. But in this hyper local perspective, how do you play in tension with the need for local communities to figure out in a way to address plastic waste that's entering their communities and giving it a market to use within the communities, and then also a natural demand for larger projects that will help the business grow and will actually continue to sort of feed consumer change and adoption and continue to help sort of scale this mission?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think ideally we would be sourcing material locally or regionally and supplying end product also regionally. Um, I would say about 80% of our clients from last year were outside of Ohio, primarily New York area and California.
Interesting.
And so,
Some
yeah, it's
type
like
of demographic that's interested in recycled plastic.
exactly. I mean, like
Yeah.
if you think about the most progressive, environmentally friendly places, they're on the coasts, and we're in the Midwest, conveniently in between them. Uh, so I would love it if we could supply, products locally. I don't know if there's enough demand to satisfy that at this moment. However, I think as things progress, as people become more environmentally conscious, I think that's possible. However, so when we think about this issue, we think about it in terms of regional scaling regionally. So if we get big enough that we sort of outlast our small factory, I would like to set up other small factories that are based in demand centers. So New York, for example, which has been a big one for us, is we can set up another small factory of around the same size as we have now to be able to source material locally there and then supply locally there. So that would be our scaling plan um, if it gets big enough for that to happen. If it doesn't, if it's just, we have a small factory here in Ohio and that works, I'm also happy with that. But I think ultimately to really make a big impact, you want to scale, not just from a, business standpoint, but also from an impact standpoint.
And so the decentralized is really possible then, and sort of you're essentially then going to multiply your knowledge, multiply that essentially your special sauce, and sort of build that sort of decentrally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're trying to design our current operations around that idea. So sort of like building a franchise before you have a franchise, um, to make it easy when that day comes. And I do think it will, just because I know there's demand out there. I think the thing that holds us back the most is just awareness, like that people don't know the product exists. I've never been in front of an architect or designer who wasn't very excited when they sell the material. Like, which I think is saying, I haven't tried to like sell a lot of different types of products, but it feels like easy in the sense that they just, when they know about it, they're like, oh, this is cool. This is great. This is something I've not heard of and I want to use it.
Yeah, and I was curious because that decentralized thought, it really came from your origins with precious plastics, so that model of delivering machinery to local entrepreneurs and kind of innovating at the local level. Could you share some success stories that you saw internationally as well? And were they using the same type of plastic, the same type of machinery, or is it like totally custom to the local feedstock?
Yeah, I think the decentralized idea certainly comes from my experience at Precious Plastic, seeing the wide variety of different organizations around the world using the technology. Um, and I think part of it comes from the idea that the sort of the failures of that sort of system, because what I saw was a lack of coordination for the greater good, which makes sense when you have a lot of independent actors without something tying them together. There was a lot of informal working together, so maybe this one small business in this area had some machinery that a different one didn't have. And so they collaborate because they need it for a certain project. Actually, I can speak to one project we're doing right now, which is working with a company in London called Are You Mad? Really cool guys. They do like workshops, and they are going to South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas next month. They're doing a recycling workshop there, and they need furniture and some like the top of a DJ booth because they're going to be at like a social event. So we're making that stuff for them because they're in the UK, number one, and they don't have the machinery to do it, and they don't want to ship it across the world. So that's how we're collaborating. But yeah, So I saw a lot of informal working together like that. But I think if there was a higher level of coordination between like franchisees or something within the same network, I think you could make a lot more impact because there'd be a higher level of coordination.
When you're getting more involved, and again, these collaborations are so key because I think it's both not only paying the bills and helping grow the business, but really then it's even more education. In the world of where you're setting sail towards commercial, and getting that commercial production, that commercial volume, um, where are the misconceptions about plastic in design and architecture and the certifications potentially that are or are not necessary when dealing with those questions that might pop up? I mean, I think about all of the questions that certain architects or designers or even procurement specialists have, and they somehow need to be satisfied in that. How are you all tackling that?
Yeah, it comes up definitely sometimes when talking with architects. When they when they hear a new material, I think that always sounds a bit risky for them.
Scary, right?
Scary because they're kind of responsible for that, and it is their responsibility to know whether in this application does it need certain fire resistance. So yeah, we just try to talk them through those issues to see if this material is a good fit for that particular application. I think also just from a societal standpoint, when people hear plastics, that has a certain connotation to it. Um, if you hear recycled plastic, that might feel good. To other people, it might even feel bad. So it kind of depends on who you're talking to. And yeah, it's something that we just try to be open and transparent about, where we're at in terms of what testing we've done, and what they need for that application. Also, just understanding what is the application and what we recommend it can be used for or not. Like for example, even though polystyrene can be a food safe plastic and it is used in many food applications, we could get our material tested to say this is a FDA food safe approved. I've thought about it, but to be honest, I don't really even want to do that because I don't think that plastic should be used as a cutting board, to be honest, because I think as much as you can get it tested and it technically falls within the legal limit, just logically, common sense, you're using a knife and putting that into its abrasive function into a material that, yeah, it is a chemical. Do you want that in your food? I don't think so. And that's not something that we want to push. But there are plenty of applications where you're not eating directly off of it, where it is a perfect fit for. So yeah, kind of thinking through the application and talking with the client about.
Are you finding also that you need to sell the environmental impact of using this material versus others? Yeah, I'd be curious, like relative to wood, because like wood stores carbon. So if people are like leaning more towards wood than instead of recycled plastic. So yeah, and then also like, are people actually looking at the numbers, or is it just like it feels like a good decision, so I'm gonna go for it?
I think it's primarily a feeling, to be honest. I think it's they knew there's an environmental benefit. I mean, I think are they doing an LCA? Are we doing an LCA a bunch against a bunch of different materials? No. Um, but that as compared to using a virgin material, it's almost certainly better. And it has a unique story that has a lot of value if you are in that sort of user-facing situation. So yeah, I think it's some of both. It's thinking about the environmental benefit, not calculating exactly, just kind of knowing this is most likely a better solution, and then understanding the fact that it has a high storytelling impact. That yeah, it has the impact of using a cool product, but also the fact that each person that uses that ideally is changing their perspective about single-use plastic material. So that's very difficult, almost impossible to quantify. So yeah.
What advice would you have for entrepreneurs that might be following your path into sustainable building material, making of use of feedstocks that are underutilized. We need more people thinking like that. What advice do you have for those types of entrepreneurs seeking that path?
Yeah, I would say start small.
Yeah.
There's so much you can learn on a very small scale. What the product that we're making is a big one, and it's hard. The bigger that you go, the harder it is. So there's a whole movement like within precious plastic, but also just people on the internet of small scale DIY recyclers. And I think it's a great way to learn and just experience firsthand working with this material. And there's a lot to learn from the people that have already done it before you. Um, because the interesting thing about plastic as material is that it didn't have, hundreds of years to develop as on the sort of small scale nature that wood and metal did. It's almost like just recently that has happened, because when plastic was first invented, it's a mass production technique, so it didn't have time to be worked on a small scale. It's only after the fact now that we're like deindustrializing it in a way. So
Never
yeah,
thought about it like that. Yeah.
I would recommend to start small, learn as much as you can about plastics, and go from there. But yeah, it's very challenging. So I would also add that caveat.
And follow-up question on that from someone who's eager to buy some of these products. I actually went on and I was trying to find, I'm always fascinated by SEO problems. When I'm trying to find something and it's not being provided to me, I was trying to find, I was like, you know what? I need some coat hangers. I could go maybe try to find some coat hangers. And the only ones I could find after a 20-minute search was coming from Greece, likely from maybe even a project in the precious plastic universe.
Yeah.
That seems like a market issue or a communication issue somewhere in there where I can't somehow, I mean, that's definitely a Google issue because we all know that there's probably some barriers to entry on me getting the thing I want. But how do you see that playing out in terms of that continued barrier to entry to sort of communicating out this product?
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, it's probably mostly a supply issue. I think there's probably not a lot of recycled plastic coat hangers. You know,
Interesting.
I think that's part of the answer. The other part of it is there could be, but they don't market it that way. So a lot of manufacturers use recycled material, but they use it as a cost mitigator. They use it because for them to buy virgin plastic is a little bit more expensive, depending on the time and year and type of plastic.
Yeah.
But so a lot of manufacturers blend in like 30, 20, 30, 40% recycled material, but they don't even say it because they do it for from a cost standpoint. So I think those are kind of two parts of that issue. Is one, there's just not that many people doing it, and two, the people that are doing it don't market it that way.
So if you were actually, and this is a live question that you may not be like, good luck, I don't know. But what would be the thing I should Google to get a product that looks like it's blending multiple colors together and for someone out there who's listening is like, I want this. Do you have keywords in the industry that you use to define what this amalgamation of product that has a sort of a look and design aesthetic? Is there a keyword thing here that I'm missing?
I don't think so. It's not a keyword issue. The problem is that 99% of all plastic that's being used in new production, or even if it's recycled plastic, goes through a process which makes it look homogeneous.
Right.
So you can't
So the non-homogenized.
Yes.
Yes.
That it's only done by basically really small scale machines. And when you do it at that level, it's not that efficient. So it's going to be expensive, number one, because you can get that aesthetic because it's not efficient. It's kind of this weird dichotomy.
Yep.
It's like it looks cool because it's handcrafted, which makes sense in other contexts, other crafts. But yeah.
I thank you for letting me follow my hunch here. It was like I knew there was a Google problem, and then I knew there was a deeper market answer
problem.
probably. Yeah, more of a market problem.
Yeah.
It's a cool way to look at that issue.
Yeah. I'm curious, tell us about the future of your business, your dreams, and what you're hopeful for.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to see that sort of dream of decentralized sheep producers, at least around the US. It already is kind of around the world. Um, and I would love to see this sort of product as a sort of commonplace building material where people wouldn't think like, oh, this is a weird, uh, new, maybe risky product to use, but it's just like, oh yeah, that's the recycled plastic marbly um, look, um, and for that to be like a popular aesthetic that people want, um, because right now it's like it's a niche, that there's a certain people that would like that, but to see that as like a mainstay aesthetic, I think that would be the dream.
Love that. Thanks for the time today. It was so good talking to you, Joseph. Inspiring work. And I hope so too. I want more of that. I want more gelato products coming my way. I could just make a whole gelato home. Yes, just everything. It's just nice and sparkly and has nice flecks of bread tags.
Love it. Thank you guys for having me on.